This Christian holy relic is referred to as the Shroud of Turin.
The Shroud of Turin is this amazing relic. At bottom, it's a piece of cloth. It shows a very faint sort of image of a crucified man.
What if I told you a single piece of cloth holds a secret no human eyes have ever seen? A 14-foot linen, burned, buried, and debated for 2,000 years, has just revealed something impossible.
Shroud of Turin, one of the rarest pieces of history, will be on display this weekend.
A hidden three-dimensional code, embedded in ways medieval forgers could never understand. This is not speculation. This is the Shroud of Turin, and a supercomputer just uncovered evidence that could rewrite history and challenge our understanding of reality itself. The digital ghost in the fibers. Start with what the artificial intelligence actually found, because this is where the mystery becomes impossible to dismiss. When researchers fed enhanced scans of the shroud into neural networks designed to detect patterns invisible to human perception, the computer identified something extraordinary. The intensity of the image on the cloth corresponds precisely to the distance from a three-dimensional body to the fabric surface. This is not how paintings work. This is not how stains work. This is not how any known image-forming process works. The shroud contains a topographical map, a three-dimensional relief encoded onto a flat surface with mathematical precision that follows the inverse square law of radiation. Think about what that means. The inverse square law describes how light or energy spreads out from a source. It is a fundamental principle of physics. The fact that an ancient piece of linen follows this law perfectly means the image was not made by a hand. It was made by a physical process that was controlled and precise, radiating outward from a three-dimensional form. No artist in the Middle Ages understood the inverse square law. No artist in the Middle Ages could have deliberately encoded three-dimensional information onto a two-dimensional surface in a way that modern computers can decode and reconstruct. This would be like someone in the Dark Ages writing functional computer code with a quill pen. The knowledge simply did not exist. The artificial intelligence revealed something else that makes forgery essentially impossible. The image sits only on the very top of the linen fibers. It penetrates to a depth of approximately 200 nanometers. For comparison, a human hair is 80,000 nanometers thick. The coloration does not soak through the cloth. It does not penetrate the fibers. It rests on the surface like a whisper, affecting only the outermost layer of the threads. And no paint does this. No dye does this. No pigment applied by any known method produces this effect. The fibers themselves have been chemically altered at the molecular level, changed by something that behaved like light, but acted like a physical force. The machine also confirmed what researchers had long suspected, but could not prove definitively. The image has no directionality. In every painting ever created, you can detect brush strokes. You can see where the artist's hand moved, how pigment was applied, what direction the tool traveled. Computer analysis can identify these patterns even when invisible to the naked eye. The shroud has none, no brush strokes, no application marks, no evidence of any tool being used to create the image. The coloration simply exists on the fibers as if it appeared instantaneously across the entire surface. The neural network found geometric ratios in the face and body that are too mathematically precise to be random and too consistent to be the product of artistic interpretation. The proportions follow the golden ratio, that special mathematical relationship found throughout nature in shells, galaxies, and the structure of DNA. But the geometry does not stop at aesthetics. The computer detected that the positioning of wounds, the flow of blood, and the arrangement of the body all follow mathematical patterns that encode information about the physical events that created them. Consider the blood on the shroud. The artificial intelligence confirmed what forensic analysis had suggested for decades. The blood is real human blood, type AB, one of the rarest blood types on Earth. But here is the detail that eliminates forgery as an explanation. And the blood was on the cloth before the image was formed. The computer analysis shows that in some areas, the blood sits beneath the image data, while in other areas, it sits above. This layering is physically impossible to fake. If a forger had created this, they would have had to paint the image first and then apply the blood, or apply the blood and then paint around it. But the evidence shows something different. The blood flowed naturally from wounds onto the cloth, and then later, by some other process entirely, the image appeared around and through the blood stains. The blood contains elevated levels of bilirubin, a chemical that appears when a person has experienced extreme physical trauma. This is consistent with someone who was tortured before death. The computer also detected that the DNA in the blood is genuinely ancient and matches genetic profiles from the Middle East. But the precision goes even deeper. The artificial intelligence mapped over 120 distinct whip marks on the body and determined they were inflicted by two different people of different heights, striking from different angles. The computer could actually calculate where the torturers were standing based on the mathematical pattern of the wounds. This level of forensic detail is impossible to fabricate. A medieval forger would have had no understanding of the physics involved, no way to calculate wound patterns from strike angles, and no reason to include details that would remain invisible for 700 years until computers could detect them. The carbon dating catastrophe. For over 3 decades, the Shroud of Turin has been widely dismissed as a medieval forgery.
The Shroud of Turin is facing major scrutiny from a new 3D finding.
The reason? A single scientific test performed in 1988 that was supposed to settle the debate forever. 3 prestigious laboratories, Oxford, Zurich, and the University of Arizona, analyzed a small corner of the cloth and declared with absolute confidence that it dated to between 1260 and 1390 CE. Headlines around the world proclaimed the verdict. The shroud was a medieval fake. Textbooks were updated, documentaries were filmed. Millions accepted the conclusion. Case closed. Except it was not, because the 1988 test was deeply flawed. So flawed, in fact, that it may be the most catastrophic scientific blunder in the history of artifact analysis. The problem begins with the sample itself. And the laboratories did not test the central area of the shroud where the image appears. They did not take multiple samples from across the cloth. They tested a single corner, a corner that had endured centuries of handling, exposure, and fire. Over the centuries, thousands of pilgrims and clergy had touched that corner. Oils from human hands, dust, biological contamination, and environmental debris had accumulated. The corner was, in short, the most contaminated portion of the shroud. Yet the laboratories treated it as representative of the whole artifact. The contamination alone was enough to raise questions. But the real problem went far deeper. In 1532, the shroud nearly burned to destruction. A fire broke out in the chapel where it was stored. And the heat became so intense that the silver container melted through multiple layers of the folded linen. The cloth survived, but it was badly damaged. To preserve it, a group of nuns performed an extraordinary repair using a technique called invisible reweaving. They carefully replaced damaged threads with new ones, matching colors and textures so perfectly that the repairs were nearly undetectable to the naked eye. And here is the critical detail. The corner tested in 1988 was part of that medieval repair. Microscope analysis conducted decades later revealed that the threads in the sample were coated with plant gum and a yellow dye, materials used by the nuns to make the repairs blend seamlessly with the original fabric. The sample tested was not representative of the ancient shroud at all. It was a medieval patch, artificially aged and chemically different from the rest of the cloth. Declaring the entire shroud a forgery based on that sample is like dating a cathedral by analyzing scaffolding added during a recent renovation. Despite this, the 1988 carbon test became the definitive scientific verdict, and for 35 years, It shaped public perception and scholarly opinion. But modern research tells a dramatically different story. Using non-destructive techniques that analyze fiber degradation, scientists have measured how linen naturally breaks down over time. These tests indicate that the shroud is approximately 2,000 years old.
Shroud of Turin, which some believe to be the actual burial cloth.
Consistent with 1st century CE burial practices. Other lines of evidence reinforce this conclusion. Microscopic pollen and dust trapped in the fibers originate from plant species unique to the Jerusalem region. Limestone particles embedded in the cloth match the geological signature of tombs in that area. Even the weave, a 3-to-1 herringbone twill, is consistent with elite 1st century Jewish burial shrouds and extremely rare in medieval Europe. Every independent indicator, fiber decay, pollen, limestone, and weaving style, points to genuine antiquity. The 1988 test, in contrast, measured only a small corner contaminated by centuries of handling and medieval repair. The conclusions it produced were catastrophically misleading, yet they dominated the narrative for decades. The result was a paradox. All the physical, chemical, and environmental evidence supports a 1st century origin, yet a single flawed carbon test convinced the world otherwise. The implications are staggering. If the shroud is authentic, it is not merely an artifact. It is a piece of history preserved with extraordinary fidelity, carrying biological, chemical, and physical information from the 1st century. Every fiber, every stain, every geometric pattern may contain a record of events that no medieval forger could have created, and that only now, with modern technology, are we beginning to decode. The question is no longer about belief. It is about evidence, methodology, and the willingness to revisit assumptions. For centuries, scholars have treated the 1988 test as gospel, ignoring anomalies, contextual evidence, and the very real possibility that the shroud's age had been catastrophically misjudged. A modern science now forces us to confront what the data has been quietly revealing all along. The shroud may indeed be far older than the Middle Ages, consistent with a 1st century origin, and capable of telling a story that we are only beginning to understand. For 35 years, a corner of linen misled the world. Now, as computers, spectroscopy, and geochemical analysis peel back the layers, the Shroud of Turin stands once more at the edge of history, daring us to listen, analyze, and question everything we thought we knew. The radiation signature. We enter territory that challenges the boundaries of known physics. If the shroud is genuinely 2,000 years old and the image was not painted, drawn, or applied by any conventional means, then how did it get there? The artificial intelligence analysis points toward an answer that sounds like science fiction, but is grounded in measurable physical evidence. The image appears to have been created by a burst of radiation emanating from the body itself. Scientists at a specialized research facility attempted to replicate the shroud image using modern technology. They found that they could produce a similar effect on linen, but it required vacuum ultraviolet radiation at intensities measured in billions of watts, delivered in a fraction of a nanosecond. That is more power than an entire city consumes, concentrated into a space the size of a human body, released in less than a billionth of a second. No technology in the medieval period could produce this. No technology in the 19th century could produce this. Even today, generating such an energy, burst in a controlled manner, pushes the limits of what is technically possible. The computer analysis detected characteristics consistent with what physicists call a corona discharge, the same phenomenon that occurs during lightning storms when electricity ionizes the air. If a body somehow released that much electrical energy instantaneously, it would explain several anomalies. It would explain why the image sits only on the surface fibers without penetrating deeper. It would explain why the fibers are chemically altered rather than stained. It would explain the three-dimensional encoding that follows the inverse square law. And it would explain why the carbon dating was thrown off, because electrical discharge can alter the carbon isotope ratios in organic materials. is making objects appear younger than they actually are. Some researchers have gone further, proposing that the shroud records evidence of a cold fusion reaction, a nuclear event that released neutrons which altered the carbon atoms in the cloth. This would produce exactly the kind of dating anomaly observed in 1988, making the shroud appear centuries younger than its actual age. If this theory is correct, the very event that believers call a miracle is the same event that caused the scientific test to produce misleading results. The physics of the resurrection, if that is what occurred, created its own smokescreen. Here is a detail that changes how we must think about the image entirely. Normal photographs are made by light bouncing off a subject and into a recording medium. The light source is external. Shadows fall according to where the light originates. But the shroud image has no shadows that follow normal external lighting. The computer analysis suggests the light source was internal. The body itself was the lamp. The radiation that created the image did not shine onto the body from outside. It emanated from within the body, radiating outward through the skin and onto the surrounding cloth. This would explain why the image is so crisp at the fiber level. External light has to travel through air, where it can scatter and blur. Internal radiation would transfer directly from skin to linen with minimal distance and no atmospheric interference. It would also explain the uniform intensity across the entire body. An external light source would create gradients and shadows based on angle and distance. So an internal source would radiate equally in all directions from every point on the body's surface, creating the precise three-dimensional encoding that the computer detected. The artificial intelligence found that the image contains information about internal structures, not just surface features. Some researchers describe it as combining the properties of an X-ray and a photograph, recording both external appearance and internal anatomy onto the same surface. This is consistent with radiation originating from within and passing outward through the body before reaching the cloth. Whatever created this image recorded the entire body, not just its surface. The quantum hologram theory. The most radical interpretation of the computer findings suggests that the shroud is not merely an image, but a quantum hologram, like a recording of a body transitioning between states of matter in ways that our physics cannot fully describe. This theory arises from a specific anomaly that the artificial intelligence detected. For the three-dimensional information encoded on the cloth to be as precise as it is, with no distortion from the curves and folds of fabric wrapped around a body, the cloth would have had to pass through the body as the image was being formed. Not around it, through it. When you wrap cloth around a face and then lay it flat, any image transferred to that cloth should appear distorted, stretched wide by the curves it followed. The shroud image shows no such distortion. The face appears as if photographed from a distance, with correct proportions and no warping from surface contact. And this is physically impossible unless the recording process somehow bypassed normal three-dimensional contact. The computer modeling suggests that during the image formation event, the body and cloth existed momentarily in a state where solid matter behaved differently, where the body became transparent to its surroundings, allowing information to transfer without physical contact in the conventional sense. The artificial intelligence detected a slight blur in certain areas that suggests the body was vibrating at extremely high frequency during the image formation. Some physicists interpret this as evidence of a body literally converting from matter to energy, oscillating so rapidly that it could pass through solid objects. If this interpretation is correct, the shroud is a recording of that transition, and a snapshot of the moment when the laws of physics as we understand them temporarily stopped applying. The image contains multiple layers, as if the body was recorded several times in rapid succession during this vibration, creating what is called a stroboscopic effect, where separate moments appear merged into a single image. This leads to what some researchers call the event horizon theory. In physics, an event horizon is the boundary of a black hole, the point where space and time behave according to different rules than the universe we experience. Some theorists propose that during the resurrection event, if that is what the shroud records, the body and the cloth entered a state analogous to an event horizon for a fraction of a second. During that moment, the information from the body was projected onto the cloth through a process that transcends normal cause and effect. The computer sees the image as a sequence of data points, rather than a continuous picture, because that is what it is. It is a data dump, a recording of physical information transferred through a mechanism we do not have the science to fully explain. Some researchers have begun describing the shroud as a biological hard drive, a storage medium that recorded and preserved information about the person it wrapped using mechanisms we do not fully understand. The information density on the cloth exceeds that of a modern DVD. If we could develop methods to read the complete data encoded in those fibers, we might access information about human biology, physics, and the nature of consciousness that remains locked away in the weave. The DNA extracted from the blood is being analyzed with increasingly sophisticated techniques.
With fresh optimism, thanks to advancements in DNA analysis. They say that's due to better DNA extraction techniques and genetic genealogy.
Early findings suggest genetic markers consistent with Middle Eastern ancestry, as expected, but some researchers claim to have detected anomalies in the genetic code that do not match typical human baselines. These claims remain controversial and require further verification, but they add another layer to the mystery. If the man in the shroud possessed genetic characteristics that differed from ordinary humans, it would support the theological claims made about his nature while raising profound questions about human biology and potential. The message. Waiting for a reader. The preservation of the shroud itself presents another mystery that deepens everything we have discussed. Ancient linen typically degrades significantly over 2,000 years. The shroud has survived in remarkably good condition considering its age, and the fires, floods, and handling it has endured. The computer analysis shows that the fibers remain unusually strong compared to other ancient textiles. Some researchers speculate that the same energy burst that created the image may have acted as a preservative, altering the molecular structure of the linen in ways that resist normal decay. If the shroud is a recording medium, perhaps it was also engineered, deliberately or as a side effect of the image formation process, to preserve itself until technology advanced enough to read its contents. The artificial intelligence detected patterns in the weave that resemble sound waves frozen in physical form. This has led some researchers to propose the resonance theory, the idea that the image was created not by light, but by sound. Specific frequencies can cause materials to vibrate in patterns that create visible shapes, a phenomenon called cymatics.
The first experiment for the cymatics music video is called a Chladni plate. Plate vibrates, which forms different shapes depending on the frequency of the sound.
If the correct frequency was generated during the resurrection event, it could theoretically have caused the linen fibers to vibrate and change color in patterns that encode three-dimensional information. The geometry found by the computer supports this interpretation. The ratios of the facial features align with frequencies found in the human voice. The proportions of the body correspond to harmonic relationships found in music and acoustics. If the shroud is a piece of frozen sound, a physical recording of a specific frequency or set of frequencies, then the image is not a picture at all. It is music. It is the sound of whatever happened in that tomb, captured permanently in the structure of the cloth. This interpretation sounds mystical, but it is grounded in physics. Sound is vibration. Vibration affects physical matter. Under the right conditions, sound can create visible patterns in physical media. The question is, what sound could be powerful enough and precise enough to create an image this detailed, and what event could have generated such a sound in a sealed tomb 2,000 years ago? The resonance theory does not answer these questions. It merely points toward possibilities that our current understanding of physics cannot fully address. Here is perhaps the most unsettling implication of the computer analysis. The shroud appears to have been waiting for 2,000 years, and it preserved information that could not be read because the technology to read it did not exist. The three-dimensional encoding was invisible to every generation that examined the cloth before the 20th century. The mathematical patterns were undetectable before computers could analyze them. The radiation signatures were meaningless before physics advanced enough to interpret them. The shroud sat in silence, holding its secrets, until humanity developed the tools to finally see what was always there. Some researchers describe this as evidence of deliberate design. The information on the shroud is encoded in ways that require advanced technology to decode. And whoever or whatever created this image either knew that such technology would eventually exist or operated according to principles so sophisticated that our most advanced machines are only beginning to comprehend them. The shroud is not just a relic, it is a message. And the message was written for readers who would not exist for 2 millennia. The computer has shown us the door. The neural networks have detected patterns that human perception could never identify. The mathematics reveals structure and intention where previous generations saw only a faint, mysterious image. We are the first humans in history equipped to read what the shroud actually says. The question now is what we do with that knowledge. 2,000 years, fires, wars, and centuries of skepticism. And yet, the Shroud of Turin still speaks. Not in words, but in radiation patterns, geometric codes, and signals that defy everything we think we know about physics, biology, and history. Machines are only beginning to decode its message. The mathematics is clear. The physics is undeniable. And the implications could change everything. What exactly happened in that tomb in Jerusalem? And are we ready to confront the evidence when it finally speaks in full?